Hi, this is Joe Anderson with Fortify Risk Management. Welcome to the Strategic Risk Mind, our podcast. We're glad you're here today. And as our special guest, we have a good friend of mine, Cheryl Snapp Connor with Snapp Connor PR. Welcome, Cheryl.
Hi, Joe. Glad to be here, and thank you.
Yeah. So, Cheryl, this is a real treat because you have written extensively and advised over many years on reputation risk, and that's going to be our topic today. It's a fascinating topic because it's a topic that a lot of people don't really pay a lot of attention to or don't really know how to manage. So sometimes when you don't know how to manage risk, it tends to get in those dark back corners and then it crops up when we least expect it. So, Cheryl, I wanted to ask you right out of the gate, why do you believe reputation risk is the single greatest risk factor for companies today? Because I know you've written about this.
Right. I've written, and it never gets old, and it never sits still. But the reputation is your greatest asset. In fact, it is an asset on your financial table, or should be. More and more, the most significant companies are putting risk and reputation in the C-suite. So it is important. There's so much that we can do. There are some things we can't do. So every single company is vulnerable, but it's never been more important, as we can see from the headlines, even today.
Yeah, I mean, there's just headlines coming out one after another. It's pretty incredible. It's interesting when I think about what people say to kind of put off reputation risk. Like, what do you think? I'm curious, just what do you hear as excuses why we don't need to deal with reputation risk?
I see companies say, we just do our best, we do a good job, we do our business, so we have nothing to worry about. That's head in the sand. Or we're not important enough. We're far enough below the radar, it could never happen to us. Yeah, you think so? Or they're just simply naive. Like, we'll get to that. It's like the dentist office. I'll get there, but it's not here yet.
Not on the top of my list.
No.
Yeah, interesting. Well, as you and I have talked back and forth, there's, events that we just see in the national news and the local news, and they have to deal with reputation risk. And I think, one of the things that I think is fascinating is the social media and the kind of the digital age. So, you've been in this business for a little bit, and you've seen this digital age come on and the social media side come on. So can you give us some perspective as to the reputation risks maybe companies had prior to our digital age and how those would be dealt with, and then has that changed as everything's gone online and gone a little quicker and faster?
Well, there would be the trillion-dollar question. In fact, my book is called Beyond Words, How to Communicate Like a Champ in the Digital Age, about that very topic. It's on Amazon. It was a Forbes ebook that they gave me the rights to, so it's available now.
Nice.
But prior to the digital age, it was much easier to contain and control a message, because how could people reach you? You'd have to answer the phone. It was more an issue at that point of not giving the CEO's cell number to other people, or not having the person answer it. Because if they're on the phone with someone, then there's the risk that the first words out of their mouth were on the record, and it might be, oh my gosh, how did you get my number? Or something that doesn't make for a flattering headline. So it would be that kind of a potential risk. Now the risk is so much bigger. In the digital world, it may be something that you posted or one of your employees posted on social media, or something that somebody posted about you on social media, or people having to manage their day-to-day actions relative to what would it take for you to give me a 5-star review.
Yeah.
There are parody style Black Mirror episodes about that, where the whole world is living for that, and how you're ruined if you don't have a suitable online review.
Well, and I think it's interesting because the world has seemed to be less forgiving sometimes. And we talked about that too, and it's not on one side or the other on the political spectrum or in the country zone geographically, but it just seems like people are judging first and looking at the facts later in social media, and that can really impact reputation.
It's strange, and in fact, it's in a lot of ways it's tragic and sad that there is just so much anger. Like, some people call it pissed off waiting to happen, looking for an excuse and looking for a target.
Yeah.
And that's just tragic. That's sad. There's so much existentially that we ought to do can do differently that way, but still, knowing that it's where we're in, we've got to live with this. We've got to deal with it.
Yeah, and then you have this whole kind of side of things with the digital age now in AI, where people can be misrepresented, almost a exact likeness of them saying something that they didn't really say, which is another interesting facet.
Made into a cartoon, a meme, isn't that lovely?
It's incredible. So what are, as we're looking at reputation risk, what are the most common things that lead to a reputation crisis?
Lack of preparation is the most common thing. And honestly, the preparation you can make, it could be so simple. If I could get one message through to CEOs is do some media training, just brief, just little. And it can matter just things like, do you have employee contracts? And what do those contracts say about your right and responsibility to speak on behalf of the company or to share information, and with whom? Or is there even just a non-disclosure or confidentiality clause? Because people with good intentions who are just chattering about your sales forecast, things happening at work, or just saying something that they thought was cute and funny and it didn't come across that way.
I see. So, having some policies and procedures are important.
Correct.
On to not just like how we're supposed to operate the business and how we're supposed to be safe, but how we're supposed to engage.
And, even just the simple things like I heard that Dell's social media policy was just don't be stupid. That bear in mind, if you put something out there, it's there. It's on the record. People will see it. Think about that before you put this cute remark up. Or just don't speak on behalf of the company unless you've been authorized to do so.
Yes.
Just the basic things, but just knowledge of that and protection of that. Theranos, while it needed to be taken down, it happened far more quickly because there was no confidentiality, non-disparagement confidentiality clause. A senior vice president leaves and is free to go anywhere they please and say whatever they like.
Whatever they like, yeah. That's interesting. So I know in working with your firm, you guys provide training for company spokespersons.
Yes, we do.
Spokesperson training. And I just think that's fascinating. I had a very brief training on that in my past, where you had to speak to a camera and you had to think about what you're going to say and have it come out well and all those things. But that's an important training. Why should a company invest in having their people trained in how to be a spokesperson?
Well, there are multiple levels of training, and what you've just described is important. It's so that you're prepared and you'll come through effectively. But even just the spokesperson training that says, how do we make certain we're on message? What is the message, for starters? And how do we make certain that that's what we're accurately communicating to all of our publics, not just to the press technically, but to our customers, to our websites, to our quality control people.
Yeah.
And that even one session of 10 minutes can go so far. Just a session where everyone says, here's how we communicate, here's what happens, here are the things that are laid in place. If there were a crisis, if there were an accident on site, what would happen? We do have a list, it's prepared, who needs to know, and in what sequence, so that if things were condensed, that could happen properly within 30 minutes. So that we don't have, for example, our board members or shareholders learning what happened from the press rather than from us.
Yeah.
Or the employees. Even if in a dire emergency, a statement needed to go out to them simultaneous with it hitting the wire, still you've been far more appropriate than if anybody critical to this process is having to learn in the worst possible way.
So part of this is having some alignment with your leadership, where
Absolutely.
they're on the same message. I kind of am repeating some of the things you say here, but I want to point that out. I think that's really important, because a lot of times we assume that everybody else is going to respond the way we would, because that's kind of how we're wired. We make these assumptions, but really that's not the case. And if we're not having a good conversation, and maybe with a consultant having like, here's how you should message this, and then practice this, right, and have a little bit of engagement on that, it's likely that the messaging is going to not come out the way you want it.
Well, or it's sad, but in so many cases, the company doesn't have messaging. They think they know, But you get into an elevator with someone, you have a reporter ask, what do you do? And there will be people who freeze. And literally, there are CEOs who would gasp and say, if I had an hour, I could tell you, but anything less than that, it's so important, or we're magic, or I'd leave something out, that they lose the opportunity to say anything at all.
So let's talk a little bit about the audience. I'm curious to kind of hear your thoughts, because there's a lot of different players in the audience that you communicate to.
Yes.
So share a little bit about that with us, who those different players are, and what kind of messaging we want to have to some of those players.
Well, and that is so important. The very first thing, very, very first, even before a communications policy that we do with any client, is let's get your messaging down. So if we described you in 3 or 4 words, whether it's your formal tagline or not, how would we describe you? And it's not going to be expandable, revolutionary, that doesn't tell anybody anything. But for heaven's sakes, who are you and what do you do? And then with that kind of a statement, and what's your why? What's the company's vision or mission? But then thinking through, who will see this, or who do we want to see this? Of course, your prospective customers, but in addition to that, your employees, your prospective employees, your competitors, anything that you publish, they are going to see. So you need to just communicate in that perspective as well.
Very interesting.
And two, even if we did a very effective job of communicating and we said too much, we've just tipped our cards to somebody who might say, thanks for that tip, and I can get institutional money faster than you can get to your finish line. I'm going to snuff you out like a gnat.
Yes.
Or your regulators, your community, your city, your state. All of these audiences are going to matter. So you do specific communications to each of those communities, but most often you need to look at everything you're about to put out from the vantage point of those different viewers.
We kind of live in an on-the-fly communication world, right?
Oh, yes.
I mean, people just, they post stuff on the fly. They don't think about their responses sometimes. And it's just, there's almost like a little bit of adrenaline rush and kind of excitement that comes with that. But it really isn't the best approach most of the time.
Not for business. And in fact, on the fly is the exact opposite of what you want to do. Even if there are things that happen quickly or didn't go through miles of approval, they need to meet criteria. And so that's the opposite of on the fly. It's okay if we know what our message is, if we know what our objective is, if we know why we're stepping out and saying anything at all, then whatever comes out on the fly is going to be an appropriate thing.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And as I kind of work in the disaster recovery, business continuity space with companies and consulting, as we do that with Fortify Risk Management, that first step is really having your crisis communications down, because it can really change the disaster that you have to recover from.
And it will need to change too.
Yeah.
Day by day, we've become so hypercritical of each other, or the world has, that what was okay 6 months ago is now a dire crime 6 months later.
Yeah, I think that there's some good movies out there that kind of deal with disasters and they make it kind of interesting or entertaining. But you think about messaging in some of those movies, right? And some of the mishaps, or actually some of the really good statements. And it's a fun way to kind of look at crisis communications. But I think, there are people that are trained, like Cheryl, on how to deal with these types of situations, how to set yourself up for success ahead of time, so you're not having to just act on the fly. And I just think that's wonderful. So, it's fascinating to look at, on a PR disaster side, what are the major types of PR disasters you've seen? And tell us maybe some of the case studies out in the public, or just some things that you see that are kind of in the news on PR disasters. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, so many, and they can happen so fast. I mean, the Jimmy Kimmel show. He walks out and does his monologue like he does every night of the show, and suddenly it's lit off a powder keg. I'm very sure that all sides considered that he did not intend an outcome like occurred.
Yeah.
No matter what side of any situation that you're on, that was terrible. Somebody went to a concert. They're suddenly on the webcam and it's
Yeah.
behaving inappropriately, and it is global news. And those individuals are now the subject of mirth, memes. Even becomes a part of our common vernacular. Oh, I got cold-played.
Yeah.
I got filmed when I didn't intend to be. And
Unbelievable.
the things that come of that, an accident on site, a recall, a product recall, a complaint about your operation, an FCC violation, what else? Oh, crime, absolute crime. If the information, a HIPAA violation, or a hack of their database of personal information, that can be extreme.
Let's talk about a few of those. So, I mean, you mentioned an accident, a workplace accident on site. These can happen.
Yes.
We know they happen, but a lot of people aren't prepared to how I'm going to communicate to our employees, to our clients, and to the general public, and even to the regulators, right, is another whole area.
Well, and there are so many case studies on that. But first off, your employees with absolute good intentions need to know they can't talk to the press.
Yeah.
Your reporter comes on site and the guy says, well, from where I'm standing, it looked like this happened, and it looked like they think they're being helpful. That could create an absolute mess for the legalities of everything involved in that. So, as a CEO, this is a very real situation we help this company deal with, but software that runs the car dealerships across the U.S. had a problem and was down, and it was down for a period of time, and it was unknown when it went down what it would take to put the system back up. Can you imagine not being able to close a sale at your car dealership because the system that runs your point of sale is down?
It's down, yeah. A cyber attack or some sort of software issue it's unbelievable, yeah.
But the CEO wanted so much to speak from the heart and express empathy for these people because there were employees who needed to close these sales and could not because of the legality. That and that's this is an important thing too, that when something happens, when something goes wrong in any company, your first two calls are to the PR lead and to your attorney. And whatever happens after that, those two parties hand in glove.
Yeah, because you want that advice right up front. Sometimes it's too late if you call them 2 or 3 days later.
Absolutely. Well, absolutely in PR, and you could open yourself up to a lot of legal ramifications as well.
I will tell you, Cheryl, in my background with as being an insurance broker, prior to starting my risk management firm, we did a lot of risk management. We did a lot of mapping of risk. And, you also have to think about funding the PR and funding the legal in a crisis. And a lot of insurance policies have options to fund that in them that companies don't realize. And so it's like, hey, if you talk to a PR firm ahead of time, you set up a strategic plan on how you're going to communicate, you can also get a read on what's it's going to cost me on a range. And then you can go to your insurance policy and get that coverage in case it happens. And it's really a smart way to go. But we had a scenario of domestic violence on one of our sites where there was a stabbing. And it went all over the news. We had different languages involved because some of the people were immigrants. It was a real challenge. And not luckily, but with the planning ahead of time, we had some funding for that PR side of it, and we brought in a PR firm and got them on the news with all the news channels and the cycles and all those pieces. And this was not a big company. I think it had 350 employees. It wasn't huge, but
big enough to
it's big
feel
enough,
that pain.
and it went all over the national news, and because of the heinous crime, and that's that sells, right? Unfortunately. Join us for part 2 with Cheryl Snapp Connor at Snapp Connor PR on the next podcast of the Strategic Risk Mind.